Rain hammered the city streets like angry fists as Amara stepped from the crowded bus, her worn shawl soaked through within moments. She had traveled 2 days from her village, clutching the address her son had sent months ago, back when he still answered her letters. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the hope that maybe, just maybe, Damien would be happy to see her. She found his building easily enough. It pierced the sky like a glass mountain, gleaming with wealth she could barely comprehend. The doorman looked at her muddy shoes with disgust, but she showed him the address and he reluctantly let her pass. On the 20th floor, she knocked softly. Through the door, she heard laughter, women's voices, music, the clink of expensive glasses. When Damien finally opened the door, his face froze. Behind him, a beautiful woman draped in silk lounged on a white leather sofa. "Mother," he said, his voice flat and cold as winter stone. "What are you doing here?" Before Amara could answer, he glanced back at his girlfriend and forced a smile. "Wait here," he told his mother, then closed the door in her face. Amara stood in that hallway for 30 minutes, listening to the party continue inside. Finally, Damien emerged, pulling the door shut behind him. He didn't invite her in. He didn't ask about her journey. He simply thrust a handful of bills into her palm and said, "I'm busy. Go home." "But son, I came all this way." "I said go home." His eyes were empty, as if he were speaking to a stranger begging for coins. "I'll send money next month. Don't come here again." He disappeared back inside before her tears could fall. Amara rode the bus back to her village with a heart heavier than the bags of vegetables she carried each morning. But even as grief threatened to drown her, she whispered a prayer for her son, the boy she had raised alone after his father died, the boy she had sacrificed everything to educate. The next morning, she rose before dawn as always. There was work to be done, neighbors who needed help, and children who depended on the few coins she earned selling produce at the market. Back in the city, Damien woke at noon in silk sheets worth more than his mother's monthly earnings. He stretched lazily, admiring the view from his penthouse apartment, the glittering skyline that proved he had escaped the poverty of his childhood. "Damien, baby," called Sophia from the bathroom, her voice sweet as honey. "Are you buying me that diamond bracelet today? You promised." He smiled. "Of course, darling. Anything you want." By evening, he stood in the showroom of an exclusive car dealership, signing papers for his third sports car, a gleaming red machine that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. His friends gathered around, taking photos, their faces lit with envy and admiration. "You're living the dream, man," one said. Damien grinned, popping champagne that sprayed across the showroom floor. Nobody mentioned the elderly woman who had visited yesterday. Nobody asked about family or sacrifice. In Damien's world, only wealth mattered. Only pleasure counted. The past, especially a past of poverty and struggle, was something to be erased, not remembered. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother. He deleted it without reading. 300 miles away, Amara's day began in darkness. She lit a small candle and prepared breakfast. Plain porridge, nothing more. Before eating, she wrapped half in cloth and carried it next door, where old widow Thandile lived alone with her grandchildren. "You shouldn't go hungry for us," Thandile protested weakly. "Hunger is lighter when shared with love," Amara replied, helping to feed the smallest child. At the market, Amara sold her vegetables with patience and kindness, even when customers complained about prices or quality. When young Kenji came crying because he'd lost the money his mother gave him for food, Amara quietly slipped coins into his palm and sent him home with fresh tomatoes. "You're too generous," another vendor scolded. "You can barely feed yourself." Amara simply smiled. "God sees what we cannot. He provides." That afternoon, she mended clothes for neighbors who couldn't afford the tailor, charging nothing. She taught reading to children whose parents worked long hours. She swept the church steps without being asked. Her life was simple, poor, and filled with quiet acts of love that nobody celebrated, except perhaps heaven itself, which was watching more closely than anyone knew. Damien's parties grew more extravagant each week. Tonight's celebration filled his penthouse with people who called themselves friends but wouldn't recognize him if his money disappeared. Models posed by the infinity pool. A famous DJ spun music that shook the walls. Champagne flowed like rain. Damien stood on his balcony, surveying his kingdom of excess. In his hand, a glass of liquor worth more than his mother's weekly food budget. On his wrist, a watch that cost more than her annual earnings. He felt powerful, untouchable, free. Sophia appeared beside him, draping herself across his shoulders. "Baby, I need a new car. Something cute. Maybe that pink convertible we saw." "Done," he said without thinking. Money meant nothing when you had enough to drown in. Later, as guests danced and laughed, a woman Damien had just met whispered something strange in his ear. "You know someone's watching you, right? I can feel it. Like eyes in the shadows." Damien laughed, dismissing her drunken imagination. But after she left, he found himself glancing toward the windows, where the city lights reflected like 1,000 staring eyes. Back in the village, tongues wagged with gossip and judgment. The women at the market couldn't stop talking about Amara's situation. "Have you heard?" one whispered loudly. "Her son drives cars worth millions, but she's here selling vegetables in torn sandals." "Shameful," another agreed. "My son would never treat me that way. She must have raised him poorly. Children learn disrespect somewhere." Amara heard every word but said nothing. She continued arranging her produce with steady hands, her face calm as still water. Let them talk. Let them judge. She knew what they didn't, that love doesn't demand gratitude, and a mother's heart doesn't close simply because a door slams in her face. That evening, as she swept her small house, she found another envelope slipped under her door. Inside were bills, not a fortune, but enough to repair her leaking roof. No name. No note. Just quiet generosity from a source she couldn't identify. She knelt and thanked God, unaware that in a distant city office, someone watched footage of her daily kindness with tears in their eyes, planning something that would shake the foundations of Damien's carefully constructed world. Damien threw money at everything. Problems, people, pleasures. When his business partner suggested they actually work instead of partying, Damien bought him out and installed someone who asked fewer questions. When his accountant warned about excessive spending, Damien fired him and found someone willing to say yes to everything. "Life's too short to worry," Damien declared at another glittering party. "Money's meant to be enjoyed." His newest girlfriend, Vanessa, laughed and clinked her glass against his. But later, when she thought he wasn't listening, she spoke to her friend by the pool. "I swear, someone's investigating him," Vanessa whispered. "I saw a man in a suit asking questions at the club last week. Asking about Damien's family, his background, where his money came from." "Probably just jealous competitors," her friend replied. But Vanessa shook her head slowly. No. This felt different. Like someone collecting evidence for something big. Damien overheard but pretended not to. Paranoia flickered in his chest for just a moment before he drowned it in another glass of champagne. He was untouchable. He was wealthy. He was free. What could anyone possibly do to him? 8 weeks passed. Damien purchased a yacht, a gleaming white vessel he would use perhaps twice before forgetting about it entirely. He sailed it once, surrounded by people who praised his success while drinking his liquor and eating his food. His phone rang. His mother's number. Again. He let it go to voicemail, just as he had the last 20 times. The message she left was simple. "Son, I'm not asking for money. I just want to hear your voice. I miss you. Please call when you can." Damien deleted it and tossed the phone aside. "Why does she keep bothering me?" he muttered. His friend Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Dude, that's your mom. When's the last time you even talked to her?" "She doesn't understand my life now," Damien said coldly. "We have nothing in common anymore." But that night, alone in his massive bed, Damien couldn't sleep. Images of his childhood kept surfacing. His mother working 3 jobs, mending his school uniform by candlelight, walking miles to buy him books. He pushed the memories away angrily. That was the past. This was now. And the past had no place in his palace of gold. 9. The letter arrived at Amara's door on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier in a clean uniform. The envelope was thick and expensive, addressed to her in elegant script. Inside was an offer, a housekeeping position in the city, working for a wealthy family. The pay was generous, more than she'd ever earned. Enough to help her neighbors, fix the church roof, send children to school. This is a blessing, Thandao said when Amara showed her. God is answering your prayers. Amara's hands trembled as she read the address where she would work. Something about it seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. She packed her small bag with hope blooming in her chest. Perhaps this was a new beginning. Perhaps God was opening a door after so many had closed. The journey back to the city felt different this time. She wasn't chasing a son who didn't want her. She was pursuing honest work. She held her head high as the bus rolled through the countryside. When she arrived at the address and looked up at the building, her heart stopped. It was the same glass tower. The same building where Damien lived. But surely this was coincidence. The city was large. Many people lived here. 10. Amara reported to the service entrance as instructed. The manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen, looked her up and down with measuring eyes before nodding. You'll be cleaning the penthouse floors, Mrs. Chen said. The residents there are particular. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch personal items. Just clean and leave. That evening, Amara was assigned to the 20th floor, the very floor where Damien lived. Her hands shook as she pushed the cleaning cart down the carpeted hallway. When she reached his door, she knocked softly, as trained. The door swung open. Music and laughter poured out. And there stood Damien, drink in hand, surrounded by beautiful people in expensive clothes. Their eyes met. For one heartbeat, recognition flashed in his face. Then something cold and terrible happened. His expression shifted to blank indifference, as if he were looking at furniture. Oh, the cleaning lady, he said dismissively to his friends. Come back later. We're busy. Damien, Amara whispered. Son, it's me. I don't know you, he said loudly, his voice hard as stone. You must have me confused with someone else. Now please leave before I call security. The door slammed shut, leaving Amara standing alone in the hallway, her world shattering into pieces. 11. Amara stood frozen outside that closed door, tears streaming silently down her face. Behind the wood, the party continued. Laughter, music, the sound of her son's voice entertaining strangers while his mother stood feet away, invisible. Finally, she turned and walked to the service elevator. She rode down in silence, her heart breaking with each descending floor. When she reached the lobby, Mrs. Chen looked up from her desk. Are you all right? The manager asked, noticing Amara's tears. I need to leave, Amara said quietly. I cannot work here. I'm sorry. She didn't wait for a response. She walked out into the night, her small bag clutched to her chest, and made her way to the bus station. But before leaving the city, she stopped at a small church and knelt in the empty sanctuary. He has forgotten me completely, she whispered to God. He has denied me before his friends, ashamed of the woman who gave him life. But still I love him. Still I pray for him. May you watch over him when I cannot. Then, rising to her feet with sudden fierce dignity, she added words that would echo through time. But may he learn somehow that riches without honor are chains of gold that strangle the soul. 12. Back at his penthouse, Damien tried to enjoy his party, but something felt wrong. The champagne tasted sour. The laughter sounded hollow. He kept seeing his mother's face in his mind, those hurt eyes, those weathered hands that had worked so hard to raise him. He shook off the feeling and ordered another round of drinks. But over the following days, strange things began to happen. His favorite restaurant suddenly refused his reservation, claiming they were fully booked, even though he could see empty tables through the window. The luxury car dealership called to say his new order was delayed indefinitely. His credit card was declined at an exclusive club, despite having no spending limit. Technical difficulties, they all claimed. But Damien felt something else, a shift in the universe, as if invisible scales were beginning to tip. His girlfriends started complaining. "You seem distracted," Sophia pouted. "You're not fun anymore." "Nothing's wrong," he snapped. But he couldn't shake the image of his mother's face from his mind, or the coldness in his own voice when he denied knowing her. That night, alone despite his crowded penthouse, Damien felt truly empty for the first time in years. 13. Amara returned to her village with a heavy heart but unbroken spirit. The neighbors who had gossiped now gossiped more, about her failed attempt to work in the city, about her son's rejection, about her foolishness for trying. But Amara didn't hide in shame. She rose each morning as before, sold her vegetables, helped her neighbors, taught the children. If anything, her kindness deepened. Her pain became a spring of compassion for others who suffered. "How can you still smile?" Thandile asked one evening. "After what he did to you?" "Because bitterness is a prison I choose not to enter," Amara replied softly. "My son may have forgotten me, but I will not forget who I am. I am a woman of dignity. His choices do not define my worth." The mysterious envelopes continued appearing, sometimes money, sometimes food, sometimes simple notes of encouragement with no signature. Amara used every gift to help others, never keeping more than she needed. What she didn't know was that in a distant office, someone was documenting everything. Her daily acts of kindness, her unwavering grace, her dignity in the face of humiliation. And they were also documenting Damien's excesses, his cruelty, his empty pursuit of pleasure. Justice was coming. But justice moves at its own pace, building pressure like water behind a dam. Days turned into weeks. Amara settled back into village life, though her heart carried a wound that wouldn't heal. She stopped trying to call Damien. She stopped writing letters. If he wanted nothing to do with her, she would respect that choice, but she would never stop loving him or praying for him. The village children loved her. They gathered at her small house each afternoon, where she told stories and taught them reading. When little Osha fell sick, Amara sat by her bedside for 3 nights, cooling her fever with damp cloths and singing gentle songs. "You should rest," Osha's mother pleaded. "Rest can wait," Amara replied. "This child needs love more than I need sleep." Meanwhile, the local priest noticed something remarkable. Every Sunday, despite having almost nothing, Amara brought offerings to the church. Never money, but fresh vegetables from her garden, or flowers she'd picked, or bread she'd baked herself. "You don't have to give anything," he told her gently. "I have everything," she corrected him with a soft smile. "I have breath in my lungs, love in my heart, and neighbors who matter more than gold. How could I not give thanks?" The priest bowed his head, humbled by her wisdom. He had met many wealthy people with far less grace. In the city, Damien's world began to crack in ways he couldn't quite name. His parties continued, but they felt mechanical. The same faces, the same shallow conversations, the same empty laughter echoing through his penthouse. One night, Sophia left him for a richer man. "You're becoming boring," she said with a shrug. "You used to be fun. Now you're just sad." Her words stung more than he expected. Was he sad? No, he was successful, wealthy, living the dream. But when he looked around his expensive apartment filled with expensive things, he felt nothing. No joy. No satisfaction. Just a hollow ache he couldn't name. At another party, a guest he barely knew pulled him aside. "Hey, I heard something weird. Someone's been asking about you around town. About your background, your family. Thought you should know." Damien laughed it off, but unease crawled up his spine. Who would be investigating him? And why? That night, unable to sleep, he scrolled through social media and stumbled upon a video. It showed his mother in the village, distributing food to poor families. The caption read, "The kindest woman I've ever met." Damien watched, transfixed, as strangers praised the woman he denied. And for the first time in years, shame touched his heart. Amara's days in the village followed a gentle rhythm, waking before dawn, selling vegetables at the market, helping neighbors, teaching children, praying for her son. She asked for nothing. She complained about nothing. She simply lived with quiet grace that inspired those around her. One afternoon, she noticed a stranger in the village, a well-dressed man taking photographs and notes. He approached her stall with a kind smile. "Excuse me, are you Amara?" he asked. "I am," she replied cautiously. "I've heard remarkable things about you. May I ask, you have a son who's very successful in the city, yes?" Amara's face clouded briefly, but she nodded. "I do. And does he help you? Support you?" The market grew quiet. Everyone knew the answer. Amara lifted her chin with dignity. "My son is his own person. I did not raise him to owe me anything. I raised him to be free." The stranger's eyes filled with emotion. He thanked her and left, but something about the encounter felt significant. That evening, another envelope appeared under her door. This time, the note inside said simply, "Your patience is nearly rewarded. Keep faith." Amara didn't understand, but she prayed as always, not for reward, but for her son's soul. Damien's carefully constructed image began to crumble in unexpected ways. First, photos from one of his parties leaked online. Images of excessive waste, of him throwing money at dancers, of the shocking extravagance that now seemed less impressive and more grotesque when displayed publicly. Comments poured in, "While people starve, this man burns money for fun." Then someone, he never discovered who, posted a comparison. On one side, photos of Damien's yacht, his cars, his penthouse. On the other side, photos of his mother, selling vegetables, mending clothes, living in a house with a leaking roof. The caption read, "This is Damien's mother. He denies knowing her. While he drowns in luxury, she lives in poverty, after working 3 jobs to put him through school." The post went viral. Within hours, Damien's social media exploded with outrage. His phone rang constantly, journalists, angry strangers, former friends distancing themselves. "You need to respond," his publicist urged. But what could he say? The photos didn't lie. The story was true. He had denied his mother. He had abandoned the woman who sacrificed everything for him. For the first time in his adult life, Damien felt something he'd forgotten existed. Fear. Not of poverty, but of truth. Damien tried to contain the damage, but the truth had taken on a life of its own. The story spread across the internet like wildfire, not just locally, but internationally. The rich son who denied his poor mother became a viral symbol of moral decay and ingratitude. News channels picked it up. Bloggers wrote think pieces. Even celebrities commented, condemning his behavior. His business partners started pulling away, unwilling to be associated with someone so publicly shameful. Damien's penthouse, once filled with admiring guests, stood empty. The people he'd called friends disappeared like smoke. Even his most loyal companions couldn't be seen with him now. The social cost was too high. Alone in his apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture that suddenly felt like stage props in someone else's play, Damien scrolled through the comments and posts. And there, among thousands of angry messages, he found videos of his mother. Strangers had traveled to her village to film her kindness, her giving food to the hungry, teaching children for free, comforting the sick. Every video showed her grace, her dignity, her unwavering compassion. And every video made Damien feel smaller and smaller, until he was nothing but a hollow man in a golden cage. The breaking point came one sleepless night when Damien's world felt like it was collapsing around him. His businesses were suffering from the scandal. His reputation was destroyed. His so-called friends had vanished. And worst of all, he couldn't stop thinking about his mother's face, the hurt in her eyes when he denied her, the dignity with which she'd walked away. He sat on his balcony overlooking the glittering city, holding his phone with trembling hands. 4 hours, he stared at his mother's contact information, his finger hovering over the call button. What would he say? How could he possibly apologize for years of cruelty and neglect? But the emptiness inside him had grown so vast that pride no longer mattered. Fear no longer mattered. All that mattered was the sudden, desperate need to hear his mother's voice. He pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her gentle voice answered. "Hello, Mother," Damien whispered, his voice breaking immediately. "Mother, it's me. It's Damien." There was a pause. Then softly, with no anger, only love. "I know, my son. I've been waiting for you to call." And Damien broke completely, tears streaming down his face. "I need to see you," Damien said through his tears. "Please. I need to apologize. I need to make this right." "Then come home," Amara said simply. "Come to the village. Come back to where you began." The next morning, Damien drove to the village in one of his sports cars. But this time, the luxury felt meaningless. When he arrived at his mother's small house, he sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, he stepped out. Neighbors stopped their work to stare. Some whispered. Others turned away in judgment. Damien walked to his mother's door with his head bowed, feeling the weight of every mistake, every cruel word, every moment of denial. Amara opened the door before he could knock. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Damien fell to his knees. "Mother, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I forgot everything you taught me. I forgot who I was. I forgot you. I became a monster wrapped in expensive clothes, and I hurt the one person who loved me unconditionally. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging for it anyway." Amara knelt beside him, placing her weathered hands on his face. "Oh, my son. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single moment." The village watched in amazement as Damien embraced his mother, both of them weeping openly. The neighbors who had gossiped now felt ashamed. The ones who had judged Amara for raising such a son now saw the truth, that she had raised him with love, and his choices had been his own, but even those choices could be corrected. Over the following days, something remarkable happened. Damien stayed in the village, sleeping in his mother's small house, helping her at the market, meeting the neighbors she'd been helping for years. He saw firsthand the impact of her kindness. Children who could read because she'd taught them, families who'd survived hardship because she'd shared her last coins, sick people who'd recovered because she'd nursed them. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" Damien asked one evening. "Because a mother's love doesn't come with invoices," Amara replied gently. "I didn't help you so you would owe me. I helped you because you are my son, and that's what love does." Her words pierced his heart deeper than any accusation could have. He realized that while he'd been measuring worth in money, his mother had been measuring it in something far more valuable: compassion, sacrifice, and grace. "I want to make things right," he said. "Not just with you, but with everyone." The transformation began slowly but genuinely. Damien started by using his wealth the way it should have been used all along. Not for pleasure, but for purpose. He renovated his mother's house, but with her permission and input, making it comfortable but not extravagant. He funded the school where she taught, providing books, supplies, and proper buildings. He met with every family his mother had helped over the years, listening to their stories, learning their struggles. And where he could help, he did, not with flashy displays of wealth, but with quiet, practical support. "Why are you doing this?" one villager asked suspiciously. "Is this for show? For publicity to fix your reputation?" Damien shook his head. "I'm doing this because it's right. Because I wasted years living for myself, and I need to learn what my mother already knows, that the purpose of having much is to give much." Word of his transformation spread, but Damien didn't care about public opinion anymore. He wasn't performing for cameras or seeking redemption in the court of social media. He was simply trying to become the man his mother had always believed he could be. And gradually, the village began to accept him, not as the rich son returning home, but as a man learning to be human again. Weeks passed, and Damien's heart continued to change. He realized that his wealth wasn't the problem. It was what he'd done with it, and who he'd become because of it. Money itself was neutral. It was the character of the person holding it that mattered. One evening, as he and his mother sat on her porch watching children play in the street, Damien made a decision. "Mother," he said quietly, "I want you to come live with me in the city. Not as a servant or guest, but as my mother. I want to honor you the way I should have from the beginning. I want to share what I have with you, not because you need it, but because you deserve it." Amara looked at him with gentle eyes. "And what about your life there? Your parties? Your friends?" "That life is over," Damien said firmly. "Those weren't friends, they were parasites. Those weren't parties, they were distractions from emptiness. I'm keeping my businesses, yes, but I'm changing how I live. I want to use my wealth to help others, the way you've always done with your little. And I want you beside me, teaching me how." Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Then yes, my son. I'll come. Not because I need luxury, but because I want to be with you." The move happened gradually. Damien sold his extravagant penthouse and bought a beautiful but more modest home, one with extra rooms for guests, a kitchen big enough for family gatherings, and a garden where his mother could grow vegetables to share with neighbors. He brought Amara to the city not in shame or secrecy, but with pride and honor. He introduced her to his business associates, told them plainly who she was and what she'd sacrificed for him. Some were moved. Others drifted away. Damien no longer cared. The house transformed into a place of warmth rather than empty luxury. Amara filled it with her gentle presence, cooking meals, tending the garden, welcoming the few genuine friends Damien had found. He kept his wealth, but now he used it wisely, investing in community projects, supporting charities, helping families in need. Together, they hosted dinners not for celebrities and parasites, but for the people who mattered: teachers, community workers, families who needed encouragement. Damien's mother sat at the head of the table, honored and respected, while Damien served the guests with humility. "This is what wealth should look like," one guest observed. "Not parties and waste, but family and purpose." Damien smiled, looking at his mother with love. "I'm finally learning that from the richest woman I know." Months passed, and the house became a home in the truest sense. Amara thrived in the city, not because of luxury, but because she was with her son and able to continue helping others. Damien set up a foundation in her name, funding education and support for struggling families. He still drove nice cars and lived comfortably, but the excess was gone. The arrogance was gone. The emptiness was gone. In their place was something he'd never known during his years of partying: genuine joy. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their garden, Amara took his hand. "I'm proud of you, son. Not because of your wealth, but because of your heart." Damien squeezed her hand, tears in his eyes. "Everything I am, everything good in me, comes from you. I spent years running from that truth, ashamed of poverty, chasing empty pleasures. But you taught me the greatest lesson, that true wealth isn't measured in what we own, but in who we love and how we treat others." Amara smiled. "And now you know that you can have both: prosperity and purpose, success and soul. Wealth is not evil, my son. But it must serve love, not replace it." And so the rich son who had denied his poor mother learned to honor her, to share his blessings with wisdom and grace, and to build a life where wealth and virtue walked hand in hand, proving that transformation is always possible when love leads the way, and that the greatest treasure is a heart restored.